Hi, how are you? This is Grandma and Tia Adriana. We're going to read a story, okay?
Hi guys!
Hi. See, Tia is working with the camera. So, this is the book, and that's Brown. Okay, see, this is the story we're going to read. It was yesterday's book. James Herriot, he's the author. He's the guy who wrote the stories. And he is a doctor, an animal doctor. Okay, this is the story he's going to tell us about this dog. It's called Only One Woof. Woof meaning woof woof, not woof like a wild animal. Okay, you ready? Can you see the book? See the book. Okay, it says, one nice thing about being a country vet, that's a country doctor, is that there are so many interesting things to see when I visit the farms. One sunny spring morning, I visited Mr. Wilkins' farm and I laughed as I watched the two sheepdog puppies playing together in the farmyard. See the two puppies playing? And there's Mama, and there's the vet. And that's the farm. Really nice farm. Those two really love each other, don't they? I said. Mr. Wilkin nodded. Aye, they are great friends. They are never apart. See, there's the beautiful farm. See the dogs? See what they're doing? They are helping the farmer with the sheep. Mr. Wilkin was a busy man with many cows, pigs, and sheep to look after, but he still had time for his favorite hobby, breeding and training sheepdogs. For many years he had won silver cups all over the country. From the last litter he had picked the two best pups, Jip and Sweep, and he was going to train them to run in the sheepdog trials. What are sheepdog trials? Sheepdog trials are contests where different sheepdogs show off what they know about taking care of sheep, herding sheep, keeping them together. See, there's a picture of the farmer and the dog is keeping the cows together. See? Herding them. That's why they're called sheep herders. Okay, there's the puppies. The two little animals were rolling about in a happy wrestling match, growling and panting, chewing gently at each other's legs. Then suddenly they stopped playing as something else caught their attention. Look at that, I cried in amazement. They're behaving like grown-up dogs. The pups were beginning to round up a little group of tiny ducklings, much to the annoyance of the mother duck. With noses outstretched and stomachs nearly flat on the cobbles of the farmyard, they crept up to the little ducklings. See that? Choo 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 choo. Look at the mama duck. What's she saying? Hey! Hey, leave my ducks alone. Yes, said the farmer. They are only 12 weeks old, but their mother and father, their grandmothers and grandfathers, and way back as long as I can remember, were all sheepdogs. So these little things were born wanting to roll up chickens, ducks, lambs, and anything else they see. See? So here we got Puppy at the house. And he wants to round us up. Whenever somebody goes to another side of the house, he'll follow you because he wants to keep you together. That's what they want to do. See, they want to keep the little ducks together. The two doggy friends were different in appearance. Sweep was black and white, while Jip was black, white, and brown. But the thing you noticed most was that one of Jip's ears struck up while the other lay flat against his head. This gave him a funny, lopsided look. In fact, he looked a little bit like a clown. but he was a friendly tail-wagging clown. There was one odd thing about Jip, Mr. Wilkins said. He's never barked at all. I looked at him in surprise. You mean never, ever? He says, that's right, not a single bark. The other dogs make noises when strangers come to the farm, but I never heard Jip make a sound since he was born. I shook my head. How very interesting. I've never heard of such a thing. I got up into my car, and as I drove away, I noticed that while Sweep and two other farm dogs barked their farewells loudly, Jip merely wagged his tail and looked at me in a friendly manner, his pink tongue lolling out of his open mouth. A silent dog. See, there's the dogs. And this one is Jip. Just looking around. There's the farmer. He's waving goodbye to the doctor. There's Chicken.
Yeah, what about that chicken?
She's Chicken. She's moving around. Okay. Some months later, just before Christmas, George Crossley, one of Mr. Wilkins' oldest friends, and a very keen sheepdog trainer, came to ask if he could buy a dog of his own, as his old dog had died. Oh, Mr. Wilkins sold Sweet to him. I was a bit surprised about this because I knew that Sweet was further along in his training than Jip, and he looked like he was turning into a real champion. But it was Jip he kept. Perhaps it was because he just liked him. He was a funny dog with that lopsided charm that was very difficult to resist. See, there's the farmer, and there he sold this little dog. New master. And here they are. They're training. Jip must have been sad to lose his brother, his best friend, and there was no doubt that he is going to miss him. But there were other dogs on the farm, and even if they didn't make up for Sweep, he was never really lonely. Although Jip grew up big and strong, he wasn't quite clever enough to compete in the trials. So he just helped Mr. Wilkins by herding the sheep and the cattle on the farm. He was very happy to be out with his master all day, but perhaps he wondered where his doggy friend had gone.
That's so sad.
There's Jip. Yeah, he's helping the farmer with the sheep, keeping them together. And see, over here, there's a bunch of other dogs.
Lazy.
Running around. It wasn't until the following June that I next visited the farm to see a sick cow, and I saw Jip, now fully grown, rocking along on a hay cart. See, there he is. There's the hay cart.
Big horses.
The farmer, right? He's walking along with these huge horses. Remember the horses you saw at the fair? The Clydesdales? That's what these kind of horses are. They're made to pull things, and they're pulling this big wagon. And there's Jip. There's a bird. Look at this gorgeous farm. Wow. Look at the dog, the birds, the animals. See the horses pulling that big machine thing there? I spotted him again at harvest time, chasing rats among the stooks. He was always glad to see me, full of fun, bright-eyed and affectionate, but soundless. See, he doesn't bark. He still doesn't bark. It's okay, here are the guys, they're talking. There was a very long time when none of Mr. Wilkins' animals needed any help, and so I did not see him or Jip until I met them both at a sheepdog trial the following summer. Here we are at a contest. See, the dogs are going to compete. The huge field where the trial was being held was on the river's edge, and the sunshine glinted on the water. The cars were drawn up alongside of the field, and groups of men, mainly competitors, stood around chatting as they watched the dogs working with the sheep. They were dressed in all sorts of clothing, cloth caps, trilbies, deer stalkers, or sometimes no hat at all, tweed jackets, best suits, open-neck shirts, fancy ties, and sometimes neither collar nor tie. Nearly all of them leaned in on long crooks with the handles carved from ram's horns. See, crook, they call these crooks. They look like canes, walking canes, but they're really what shepherds use to keep the sheep together and to help the dogs lead the sheep. You know, all these trainers there. Look at all the gorgeous dogs. Look at them. They're mostly black, but Puppy is mostly white, right?
Yeah.
Their dogs, waiting their turn, were tied up on the fence, and it was wonderful to see the long row of waving tails and friendly expressions. Few of the dogs knew each other, but there was not a single growl. Never mind the fight. See, they don't fight, they don't growl, they well behave. I went over to Mr. Wilkins, who was leaning against his car, which was parked within sight of the final pen. Jip was tied to the bumper, and he was watching with interest as each dog took his turn. Mrs. Wilkins was sitting on a camp stool by his side. "Are you running a dog today, Mr. Wilkin?" I asked. "No, not this time. I just came to watch," he replied. Okay, they're all watching. I had been there for about 10 minutes when suddenly a farmer lifted a pointed finger. "Look who's there!" George Grossley with Sweep were making their way to the starting post. Jip suddenly stiffened his neck and stood up very straight, one ear cocked and the other flat, making him look more lopsided than ever. It was over a year since he had seen his brother, and it seemed unlikely, I thought, that he would even remember him. But he was obviously very interested, and as the judge waved his white handkerchief to begin the trial, and the 3 sheep were released from the far corner of the field, Jip rose slowly to his feet. There he is, see? He's watching the dogs. He recognizes his brother. There's Sweep. A gesture from Mr. Grossley sent Sweep racing around the edge of the field in a wide, joyous gallop, and as he neared the sheep, a whistle from Mr. Grossley made him drop onto his stomach. From then on, it was easy to see that Sweep was going to be the champion as he darted and he crouched and he at his master's commands. Short whistles, long whistles. Sweep understood them all. See? He's waiting for a command. And his master over here is directing him with whistles, telling him how to move the sheep. And there, way back there, there's Jip.
Where?
Over there. He's looking at his brother. His brother is working the sheep. See? No other dog all day had brought his sheep through the 3 pairs of gates as easily as Sweep did. Now, and as he neared the final pen, it was obvious he was going to win, unless the sheep scattered at the last moment. See? He's bringing them in. There's the sheep looking at him like, okay, all right. George Crossley opened the gate wide, and he held out his crook. See, there's the crook. I could hardly hear the commands to Sweep, but his quiet words brought the dog wriggling inch by inch over the grass towards the sheep. Were they going to go bounding away and spoil everything? I held my breath. But no, after hesitating and looking around a few times, the sheep turned and entered the pen, and Mr. Grossley banged the gate behind him. Yay! 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 As he did so, he turned to Sweep with a happy cry and a good lad, good lad, and the dog answered with a quick wag of his tail. At that, Jip, who had been standing very still, watching every move intently, raised his head and gave a single loud bark, which echoed around the field. Hey, they thought he couldn't say anything. Woof! Went Jip, and all stared at him in astonishment. Did you hear that? Gasped Mr. Wilkin. Well, I don't believe it, her husband burst out, looking open-mouthed at his sheepdog. Wow! He thought he couldn't talk.
Yeah.
Jip didn't seem to realize that he had done anything unusual. George crossly came over with Sweep, and the two dogs greeted each other happily. Mr. Wilkin let Jip off the lead, and within seconds the two dogs were rolling around, chewing playfully at each other as they used to do when they were pups. See? They recognize each other. See that? They love each other still.
Like Brownie and Puppy.
Like Brownie and Puppy. I suppose the Wilkins, as well as myself, had the feeling
Not
that
right now,
this
girl. Sorry. Go ahead.
this event might encourage Jip to bark like the other dogs. Yeah, like that.
Like that. Brownie. Girl.
She's just
Good
trying
girl,
to
Brownie. Good girl.
trying
Good
to show
girl.
you the way that
Sorry, we have a car passing right now.
she's trained,
She's trained. She's
highly trained.
highly trained.
She's gonna bark at anybody that gets close. See that?
Good girl, Brownie. Good girl.
Okay, here we go.
Quietly moving. Sorry.
Okay, so here we are back at the farm, and it says here, 6 years later, I was at the farm and I went to the house to get some hot water. As Mrs. Wilkin handed me the bucket, she looked down at Jip, who was basking in the sunshine outside the kitchen door. There you are, you funny fellow, she said to the dog. I laughed. Has he ever barked since that day? Mrs. Wilkin shook her head. No, he hasn't. Not a sound. I waited a long time, but I don't think he'll ever bark. It's not important, but I'll never forget that afternoon at the trial, I said. There's Jip. He doesn't say nothing. Nor will I, Mrs. Wilkin looked at Jip again, and she smiled as she remembered. Poor old lad, 8 years old, and only one woof.
Yay!
Okay? Okay, so we'll read another book, okay, next time. The next story here is called The Christmas Day Kitten. So I think we can wait on the Christmas Day story. Okay?
All right.
All right. See you guys. We love you.
Love you.
We love you very much.